Hey, what's up, card fighters? I actually should have gone over this list a long time ago at this point. I played this deck last week, and honestly, I was happy with the list, and well, not as happy with how it performed. Granted, I only took it to like the one locals, and I did go X1. I just like bubbled from topping, but yeah, there's definitely things that I would try differently, maybe like trying what's his name, like Leonard or Liengerg, the new Dragon Tree grade one. I would definitely like try that, like at least 2 copies, and maybe take out the, like if I'm playing the Dragon Tree grade one, maybe just take out the World Engine altogether. But I was actually really happy with the World Engine. I feel like it did exactly what I wanted it to do. But you could really just do anything with this deck, and I don't feel like it's necessarily incorrect, because the engine is kind of like, it doesn't take up the whole deck. The whole strategy order engine is really tight and compact, kind of. You don't really need to play all the cards, so you really just kind of have like free reign to like, okay, what's the secondary thing I want to do with this deck? But going on to the deck profile, you have to play Sora, period. You need it in the soul for this deck to like be active. You need Sora, period, in the soul, so you have to run that starter. Like I said, I was running the World Engine. Actually, before we get on to the grade 3s, let me just go over the set orders first. I feel like that's the correct thing to do. So one Eclipsed, just to make the token on turn 2. If we draw it, we draw it. I only played the one. I never drew it in testing, but you know, not that it can't happen. 2 Dusting, 2 Bomber Strategy Dusting. The reason that I run 2 is because I always wanna almost always I wanna search Dusting. More often than not, I don't need to call Death Ray from Soul. There was a game that like I was just up against like a very control heavy like matchup, to whereas like I actually did call Death Ray out from Soul. But more often than not, I do want to get Dusting, because that's more often than not this is your first strategy order that you proc off of Avantgarda. And then 4 copies of Shock Strategy. Now, Shock Strategy, you want to do Shock Strategy every turn. Like no joke, you want to do Shock Strategy every turn. Well, on turn 4, ideally. So after turn 3, like what you do on turn 3 kinda doesn't matter as long as you activate a strategy order, because your Vanguard is getting blocked. So essentially, whatever happens on turn 3 is like negligible. But what this deck needs to happen for the rest of the game is, for the rest of the game after turn 3, this deck is a 2-card combo, and the rest of your cards technically don't matter as long as you have at least 2 bodies in the front row. 2-card combo is what I mean by 2-card combo. I mean you need 1 Persona Ride every turn after turn 3, so that he's able to restand without hitting, and 1 strategy order. Because ideally you're going to be, you know, sucking in a strategy order into Soul every turn, so more often than not you're going to be needing to play another one to replace it every turn. Since we're not playing the grade 1 strategy order, I just didn't like the grade 1 personally in testing. It just kind of, not that it only kind of came up when you were running out of gas, and I kind of felt like if you're running out of gas, you're kind of like losing. So I just tried to make the deck more consistent into playing the strategy orders that I did want to play, because the grade 2 strategy order is actually like really strong. Like there's reasoning to run it at more than 2 copies, because there's just times where like you can catch your opponent with like, oh, he needs their interceptors, or they need the blitz order PG in hand, and you could just turn those off and it's like really good. But now going on to the grade 3s, now it makes sense. But 3 copies of AVANTGARDA, maxing out Persona Ride. Persona Ride's your whole deck, so you do really want to max out on AVANTGARDA. You don't want to play the Chalice, because more often than not you do not always, but more often than not you do need to play a strategy order every turn. 4 copies of Vogel. This card's low-key busted. Not that he's busted, but because he could search, so he doesn't even just search strategy orders, he just searches grade 3 set orders, period. So I tried to make a build work where like you would go into Abyssal Dark Knight and you tried using some of the rearguard Abyssal Dark Knight support, but it was just like a turn too slow for my liking. So I scrapped that idea, but this could be like really good in the future depending on like what other grade 3 set orders we get in the future that are more flexible, that like a deck like this could take advantage of it. But 4 copies of Vogel because it does give you instant access to your Strock strategy, whether it's in the graveyard. Well, listen, I've been watching a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh lately. And Magic, to be honest. Whether it's in your drop zone or in deck. So you really do want to max out on this, and it is your main beater in the deck, because every time you play a set order, he's going to get +5. Granted, you can only play 1 set order a turn, and it's a hard once per turn. So even with the new support that's going to come out soon, where like you could play an additional set order, he'll only get the +5 once, but it's whatever. You play Shock strategy, he's 23 by himself. You Persona Road, that's 33, not counting the extra power off of the Shock strategy swings. So yeah, he's the best card in your deck. And then 4 copies of Operate Master. The reason, now this is really not too expensive of a card. It did go down. It's like in like the $20 to $25 range now. But this is like a really, really expensive non-engine piece that's technically an engine piece because it searches you Persona Ride. Now, granted, if I do have Persona Ride, more often than not, I would just like call it, get the search off anyway, discard like a random card, or like discard Persona Ride if I know I'm not going to Persona Ride again, or if I have multiples of Persona Ride, or just discard this in the early if I know I don't need it. But it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. I feel like this is a nigh mandatory staple in this deck for now, till we get more support that just kind of like buffs up its consistency. I feel like if the consistency gets buffed up, like just like in terms of this deck seeing Persona, if it just gets buffed up like a little bit, we won't have to play this card, and we could just play like better DEATHSTER support cards when they come out. But I feel like right now we just kind of have to play it, even though like that's the only thing it does. But it's so good just because your deck revolves around the Persona Ride. So again, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Going on to the rest of the 2s, I was playing 4 Penguin. So initially I was trying out Gold Dog, but it just kind of like, because what I was trying to do with the World Engine, it kind of like clogged in the early, and I never really got an opportunity to use it to make that 5th attack. So I wanted a more flexible card that would quote unquote help the strategy, to whereas a strategy orders. It's all part of the plan. But that's the reason why I was playing Tactin personally, because let's say you ditch this in the early, you find one of your strategy orders, you can pitch it. Like let's say you find one of your bomber strategy orders, you could pitch it knowing you have another one in deck, like pitch it for Ride again, or like discard it for like whatever, or use it for whatever, because you know you have another one in deck that you could search off Ride. And the same with your Shock strategies. Like there was a lot of times where like I pitched this for Ride, I got Shock strategy, and then my Shock strategy was my next pitch for Ride, because I either already had one or I had a Vogel in my hand that could either get another one from deck or pick up that same Shock strategy from the drop zone. My initial theory with this deck, or the way that I tried to play this deck, is again, I focused really hard on the 2-card combo of always having Shock strategy and Persona Ride every turn after turn 3. So in my mind, I was just basically setting up for the next turn. I wasn't like trying to hoard a lot of Shock strategies. Like in my mind frame, it was always good enough to just keep one for the next turn, because I feel like if you tried to keep too many, it would just kind of like brick your hand and cause you to lose faster. But rest of the deck, playing, where do I want to put this? Where would be like a good place to put this? Right here. 4 copies of Bulbul Mine. So the reason that we are running Bulbul Mine was It's just like a generic counter charger, and it's a soul charger, which Vogel does use soul. Like, that's the only thing that uses soul in this deck. This deck really doesn't use its soul like that. And I was trying to find different ways to try and abuse that fact, but I really didn't find anything that like I was too comfortable with at the time. Like, I really don't like Lost Age Dragon. I don't like I really don't like Lost Age Dragon. I even tried the Goblin, the grade 1 Goblin that you can put a grade 3 on the bottom, Soul Blast 3 and draw a card, but then like Soul Blast 3 was too much because you have to keep Sora period in your soul. So like you kind of made a lot of soul, but you kind of didn't make a lot of soul at the same time. But, you know, I mainly just played this for the counter charge because this deck can become quite counterblast heavy at times, especially with the World and the Ride line, especially with the Operate Master, your Vanguard's ability, and Vogel. So, again, it was just one of those things that it was just better to max out on it, and this deck had, like, a bunch of space, so there was really no reason not to. On for the Perfect Guards, 3 DPGs, 1 Blitz Order PG, nothing really much to talk about here. Chrono Jet meta, you kind of have to play this. Back in, like, before Chrono Jet came out and, like, the Stride deck sets came out, I was like, oh, there's just certain decks that don't really build a hand like that, so they can get away with, like, not playing this. Or there's certain decks that, like, always want to have unit cards at the ready, like Greedon, so they can get away with, like, not playing this. Now you can't get away with not playing this. You need to play this now if you want to have a chance against the, if you want to have a chance against the Chrono Jet meta, low-key. Not even low-key, high-key. And I know they're kind of, like, expensive now. They're, like $20-ish a pop, $15 a pop, something like that. Not too expensive. You only really need one and, like, exchange it through decks. Like, that's what I'm doing now. Like, I got rid of all my extra copies, and I really only keep 2. One so I could just, like, play test against myself. So, like, I keep 1 so I could stick it in another deck. But, like, you really only need 1 and just, like, you know, like, pass the football between all your decks. But getting on to the triggers, we play 4 copies of the regular heal triggers. I don't believe in the new heals. I feel like the new heals are really bad, and I don't think this is a format for the old heals yet. There's really isn't, like, definitive, like, really good decks right now that, like, oh yes, this has a restanding unit, we need to use this heal, like, automatically, like, at least 2 copies. Or, oh yes, this deck has, like, a crit unit, we need to use this automatically. There's not enough, not that there's not enough decks, but there's not enough representation to where it's like you could run those cards and, like, guarantee that it would be helpful in those said matchups, because you're going to see those said matchups all the time. That's why, like, I'm just, like, I've always been a strong advocate of just, like, 4 regular heals, because the regular 15s have never lost me a game, to whereas, like, the 10s, like, having that 10k shield in the early game, or, like, just not proccing in a matchup that doesn't do those things, that restands or gets a crit, because there's a lot of decks that don't do that, just, like, really hurts. But on to the rest of the triggers. 4 vanilla crits, 4 into soul crits. There wasn't really like, technically, you could boost of this and make your Bubble Mine a 10k booster for one of your grade 3s so you could hit a magic numbers. That scenario never really came up, so, like, if you can't afford these, don't worry about it. Vanilla crits are just as good, but again, this is just one of those things where, like, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. 3 front triggers. I tried draws, and I just kind of, like, more so liked fronts in the deck more over the draws, just because, like, how I noticed how fast I was going through my deck, and I felt like this is just, like, a pretty offensive deck, and I felt like the fronts were just, well, not really that this was, like, a pretty offensive deck, but I noticed that more often than not, I'm not, unless my board goes completely untouched, I'm not really building a back row. More often than not, I'll have, like, if this stayed on board, I'll have this, but more often than not, it'll either just be him, or, like, it'll just be a Bubble Mine. But, yeah, for last trigger, the Brant Gate OT. Now, I know there's been, like, a lot of, like, wild talks of the new broken Cray Elemental OT, and supposedly it's, like, gonna replace all the other OTs. I know for a fact every Dragon Empire deck is gonna play that OT. I'm not 100% convinced that every Brant Gate's gonna play that OT, just for the fact that, like, this is just the best one. The best one, just 'cause, in my opinion, this is just the best one still, even with that Cray Elemental OT, because the effect is just widespread throughout your entire board. Like, yeah, you get a restanding rear guard that swings for 100 million twice, and sometimes that's better, but like there's a lot of times to whereas the just like the spreading of like doubling your whole front row is way scarier than like a restanding rear guard. They're like, hey, I'm gonna restand this and it's gonna attack for 100 million twice, but like it's just 1 damage. Granted, there are decks that have rear guards with crits, but more often, like there is a lot of scenarios where it's just gonna be 1 damage. To where it's like, hey, I'm gonna have a rear guard with 200 million and it's gonna be at least 2 damage. And don't forget about my other units in the front row that are also 2 damage, and their front row power was doubled. So that's my little piece on that. I know that's like not negligible right now because it's gonna be like a long time till we get that set. But yeah, this is my AVANTGARDA deck profile. I might do some like slight tweaks in the future here and there, but I've just been really wanting to move on to other decks. Like I've been working really hard on this Granfia list. Like it's been going through like so many changes, but yeah, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, guys, and tell me what you think about the deck down below. And tell me what type of content you guys want to see in the future from me. Like right now I've been toying really hard with the idea of maybe doing like a series of like I do 1 deck for an entire week. So like I take one deck like Granfia. Like I basically was playtesting Granfia the entire week and even before that week, like on the weekend. So I was playing Granfia the entire week. I took it to both locals, and I kind of feel like the footage would be lost otherwise. Like it kind of feels bad because like a lot of the footage doesn't make it to the channel, and I'm just trying to find a happy medium. So I came up with like the 1 deck 1 week where like I show you the process of me perfecting the deck through gameplay, and then at the end of the week, like either on Friday or Saturday, like I'll profile the deck and like how I came to this conclusion. And you know, like it'll have my seal of approval, because I really don't like giving you guys a deck profile that I don't believe in, that I don't think is good, that I don't think it competes. Like sometimes I'll give you guys a deck profile and be like, hey man, like this is the best I can do with it, but it still like is not good. It still needs help, you know, like, because sometimes it is, you know, like, you know, Rogue Warriors, shout outs. But yeah, tell me what you guys think about that down below also. I know I put a poll up about that, so also do check out the poll and vote. I'm gonna give that a good 24 hours before I make any hard decisions. But anyways, guys, later.